Excellent. So I'm going to kick off now. So welcome, kia ora. My name's Dave. I'll be running this session also with Lauren, who I'll introduce in a second. What we will be covering off is Workflow Max and how that specifically applies to a professional services firm. I'm just going to also bring through Lauren as one of our presenters. So the agenda that I've got for today is an update on what's happening to Workflow Max, which you may or may not be aware of. What are the requirements that professional services firms have? That's what we see. We've got a guest with us today from Projectworks, which is a great alternative option to Workflow Max for professional services firms. And we're going to have a question and answer as we go through this session. Joining me today, so my name's Dave Jackson. I'm the Managing Director of Ripped Orange. We've been a Microsoft partner and a Workflow Max partner for just on 10 years now. It was probably 10 or 11 years ago we signed up as a Workflow Max partner. So we've been using it and helping others use it for over a decade now. We've also got Lauren Parsons on the call from Projectworks. So she's a product specialist with the team there, and Projectworks is a tool that's been around for about the same time. It was built internally with a software development company about 10 years ago, and since 2019 they've been focusing on helping other professional services firms, including migrating some Workflow Max people into that world. So welcome, Lauren. Can you hear us and say hi?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the
Excellent.
intro, David.
Good. So I'm going to move on further through here. I'm going to start off with a quick poll. So I'm just going to bring this up and you'll see this up on your screen. So the first poll I'm going to do was how happy were you with Workflow Max? So be keen to get a smile reaction on that one. You just hit submit and 1, 2 or 3 stars. And hit submit, and we can see who felt that they were happy with it. So I'll just give it a second to come through from that. We will be doing some more responses as we work our way through on this. And if you're interested, feel free to make contact about some training or coaching or consulting on how to use Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Teams webinars, which is what we are using now. I'm assuming if you weren't happy at all, you probably wouldn't be on this call because you'd moved off something else already. Perfect. Okay. So let's talk about what is happening to Workflow Max. So in March 2023, so a couple of months ago, Xero announced that they were retiring Workflow Max. What does that mean? It means the product that they bought about 10 years ago was going to be retired and no longer available. They set a long deadline on that until June 2024, so that's just under a year from now. And at the same time, they said that they had sold the brand Workflow Max to another firm called BlueRock, who were going to build a new version of Workflow Max inspired by the current Workflow Max. And that would be available for early trials around December this year for partners in the beta program. And it would be available for use from February next year. So what does that mean? It means between February and June, there'll be a new version of Workflow Max available, but you're going to have to do something regardless by June 2024. The next question that we hear often is, okay, well, what will happen to my data? So you're going to need to move to a new system, regardless, either the new Workflow Max or some of the other alternatives. Various systems have different ways to integrate and move data in, and there's pros and cons in all of them. Your data won't be deleted after June 2024. It'll still be available, but it will be hard to get. And you may have noticed already in Workflow Max, there is an option to export your data, and you can do that now, and it comes through in an XML or a CSV file, but it is just a big data dump. So in the past, if you thought you could just come in and access and look at a job from a while ago, you won't be able to do that from June 2024. So you've got to think about what will happen to your data. The two questions that we get a lot of people asking is, okay, well, what are my options? And really you've got two. Option one is just wait. Don't do anything until February and have a look at the new version of Workflow Max. And that's great if you like Workflow Max, you're not keen on any change, and you're not interested in some new features. And importantly, you don't want to invest any more. You don't want to spend any more than what you've got now. That's all that you want to do. So that's one option. And then evaluate that tool in February. There'll be a lot of people looking to evaluate in that window between February and June. So it will be a busy time to get support in that. Your other option is to review the options that are available to you now. So you would consider this if you want some new features. You thought Workflow Max was kind of okay, but there are areas where you would like it to be improved on. And this allows you to move when it suits. So maybe that period from February to June next year is a busy time of year for you, and you just don't want to have any change in your business at that stage. You could make the move earlier, in November through January. It gives you another option that if in come February, if Workflow Max 2 just isn't right for you, you can choose to change to that alternative you've come up with. The negatives on reviewing options is, yes, assuming you choose to change to something else, there will be an increased cost and there is some change in your business process, but it's okay. You can work through and learn that at your leisure as you in the time that you've got. So those are the two options that we've got available to people. If you've got any questions again on those type of things, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and I'll answer them as we go. What are the requirements of a professional services firm? So this is a great opportunity to review how you're using Workflow Max, redefine processes, and then decide. So definitely don't go shopping around for features without deciding what your requirements are. I could love to go down, based in Christchurch, New Zealand, go down Morehouse Ave or in town and look at all the great Audis and Ferraris and everything there, and wonderful features, but in reality, I'll probably end up buying the Toyota Corolla or the Ford. So you've got to define your requirements first before you work your way through. Now, there's plenty of options of this meme, but one of the things that's unique around professional services firms is you're really selling knowledge. So the quick hammer tap that might have taken 30 seconds or 10 minutes, that time doesn't take much time, but the knowledge that has been built up over years of experience is where the value is, and that's what people are commissioning your services to do. So you're selling knowledge is what we see in professional services firms. Now, there's a couple of uniques around that. Time can't be stored, and also it's hard to estimate the time a task will take. How long will it take to build this bridge before you've done any foundations or anything? So you may not know, and things may change over time. Sorry, design that bridge, I should say. Building could be the same. So you're selling knowledge. And I'm sure those that are on the call here will charge for their time in different ways or a combination of these ways. So per unit of time, based on output or delivery, or a retainer. So per 5 minutes, per 6 minutes, based on an output, a training course, a workshop or something like that, which is a fixed fee, or a retainer where there's a certain guarantee of revenue and hours per month over a period of time. And certainly you can work through those different options. I want to step back a bit now and talk around professional services 101 and how you look at costings. And we're going to work through some costings, and then we're going to look through some job process, and then we're also going to look at some options within Projectworks. Now what are we, but 10 past 2, I think we'll finish around 2:35, 2:40. There's certainly plenty of time for questions. So, professional services firm, we've got 12 people here representing one person per month, but let's assume it's just one person, and there's around 250 working days in a year, okay, excluding holidays, etc. In this example, to make it easy, we've worked on a billable rate of $800 per day. So one person that might cost you, for example, $100,000, could be billed out for $200,000 if they worked throughout all of their working days. Makes you a margin of 100,000. Sounds okay, doesn't it? But then they need to take some leave because you can't have somebody working every day of the week. So 4 or 5 weeks leave, and then another few weeks of time for sick leave and other holidays, matariki, and other holidays that appear during the year. So suddenly your $200,000 worth of revenue, if you had that person working every day of the year, is now down to 166, and your margin being 66K. Let's move this further forward here, and we want to look at what happens when they can't bill all their time. So even the time that the person's got available, if only 80% of their time is available to be billed, they're going to generate around $116,000. Remember, you've got a staff cost of 100, and so you've got a margin of 16,000. So yeah, that's getting skinnier. Now I've made some assumptions here that maybe the hourly rate is a little bit low, or the staff cost is a little bit high. But you can see that it gives you this picture of what do I need to know, and the drivers on this around professional services are what's your utilization, how much time that person has available to bill, can you bill, and at what rate? And we call these backwards looking measures because you can do these in Workflow Max now, and that's great. And you would come in and you may choose some of this, your billable versus non-billable time. So let's split the two here. We've got billable versus non-billable, but we've also got staff utilization when they're available to work. Now, non-billable time could be leave and other things, or it could be time that was just a stuff up and you needed to do it again and you can't charge for the client. So there's two different options in there. What's your average billable rate? Maybe you charge different for different activities. And so what's the average that you get for that billable rate? What's your staff utilization? How much time was available to be billed? And what's your margin or your profit per hour? Margin being the difference between what you pay your staff member plus overheads versus what you're actually billing out for them. And we'll come through into a poll, but I imagine most people do those measures at the moment. What is harder to do is the forward-looking measures, and WorkForMax struggles a little bit with this. So you can see, okay, what is my projected job profit? And that's okay. You can see that at the start, but if you're halfway through the job and it's a fixed price and you are unsure whether you're going to be able to do it within the time that you've estimated, then your projected profit may start to go down. If you've already burned, if halfway through the job, but you've been through 80% of the hours that you've already estimated for, then unless you can extract and negotiate there, then the profit on that job is going to go down. The capacity you've got in the future becomes important. So how much capacity have you got to do future work? And what is that future work type? Do you need to be hiring people that are more like in these roles versus other roles? So what variations have you got there? Scheduling becomes really important, and smart scheduling will drive your productivity and profitability. When can you use people? Do you need to schedule and do that smart to save and be more productive? One of the key measures, you get this out of Workflow Max reasonably easy, is the quote value. What's the value of quotes that I've got outstanding? And what's the value if you have estimated hours that I've got left in the funnel to do? And that'll give you a raw measure, but not necessarily the profitability measures. I'm going to bring up another poll now. I'm going to bring up two actually to talk around reporting, but I'll be keen to see what you do. So I'm going to bring up this one here. And what I'll get you to do is rank these ones. So you move them up or down and then you press submit. So you might choose to rank that job profit's important and then summary, and then hit submit, and I'll get you to come through and do that. And we can see this afterwards. It's really good to get an indication of what you rank as the reports that you use the most. So I'll just pause there for a second and let you do that. Caroline, I see you've got your hands up, but I'm assuming that was just a thumbs up rather than a hands up. I've taken your hand down, Caroline, if you're asking. Perfect. Thanks for doing that. So what we're seeing is that estimated billings is an important one. So that's the value of your WIP in there, and staff time summary and job profit seems to be oscillating between the two as people fill those in. Okay. Next area I want to talk about quickly before we move on into Projectworks is around the job process. So this is what we normally see with Workflow Max users and others, is you may start with up here with a quote, and you may generate, there's some time to generate those, and often it's a lot of time. A lot of firms like to be able to create an X job or a job that they put time in that they can then recover when they actually win that work, because in professional services, it does take time to work through an estimate, and time is definitely money. Then we see clients moving into this job setup, and this is where there may be some scheduling done in Outlook or somewhere else, and they're focusing on resources and states. Once a job's underway and you're entering time against it and you are potentially doing work, then often the focus here is on the work in progress, and we could see that earlier in the survey around what our estimated billings are, which really is how much time have we put against the job. The interesting thing, and you want to think about this within your business, is just because you've got a high work in progress balance, does that mean that you can invoice in this time? Because this is your cash flow gap. You may have contracts that you have to do all this work and complete this before you can actually invoice that stage. And as that's a trend that's coming through, then you need to consider that, because there'll be a difference. You'll be holding a lot of WIP until you can invoice that. So you're working through that. As we work through an invoicing, often most firms will review that by a job manager, come in, okay, how much can we invoice for at this stage? Where was there quality work done? Was there work that wasn't of the quality we'd like to be, and we're going to have to rework it or not charge for it? And can we invoice actuals, i.e. time and materials, or partials? And can we do that both on the same invoice, which is a challenge, I know, for some architects, where it's hard to invoice a fixed fee and also a variable fee within the same invoice. And then often we end up with the job being closed, and we want to look at profitability, report utilization of staff. And you can look at that. So that's that looking in the rear view mirror. You can look at that during the job, but you often get a clearer picture at the end, especially in Workflow Max. Now, one of the interesting things is what happens outside of Workflow Max. So there's certainly some automation or integration. I'll explain the two. So automation is using tools like Zapier or Make or Power Automate, if you've heard of those, which means that when something happens over here, do something over here. So that could be in your job management tool, where job's been set up, create a folder in SharePoint. You probably all do that. Maybe it's not in SharePoint, it's in Dropbox or wherever. But at the moment, that automation may not be an automatic automation. It may be a person that does this. And this is where you can save a lot of time and be very more efficient. Things like, okay, I've sent a proposal. When the client signs it in DocuSign or whatever tool you use, take it and then actually approve the project and set up the project from there. Or when a contact's added to your Workflow Max or your job management system, add that contact into an email marketing list. So there's automations that you can have in this space. And there's also integrations where you're sucking data out of one thing and putting it into another. A good example of integration would be sucking data out of your job management system and putting it through into Power BI to produce lovely dashboards. Some of those features are available now. So HubSpot integrations, SharePoint integrations, Zapier, which allows you to integrate into a lot of other things. Think of it like a middle layer to do it. Integrations into task systems or Power BI. And in the time area, some of the newer features and some of the other tools apart from Workflow Max allow you to do resource scheduling, multi-currency, and forecasting. We're going to launch one more poll, and then we're going to go through, and I'm going to introduce Lauren. So the last poll we've got is around what activities do you do outside of Workflow Max. So come in and submit what you do there. I suspect it may be all three, but what do you do outside of Workflow Max that you would potentially like to do within your job management system? Perfect. So just a little recap on what Workflow Max did well and what we feel that it could have had some improvement. I'll get your opinions on this too. So one of the strengths of Workflow Max is was a really strong work in progress ledger. So it could build in different ways, and you could always see, and you can always see what's there to be built or has been built, etc. So that was really cool. The ability to have custom templates. We love Word, as you may be aware, so you can do some really neat stuff in that, and a really wide but potentially overwhelming range of reports. The two areas that we heard a lot from a lot of firms around it not being able to do, and there's a few add-ons to do this, was scheduling and forecasting. And yes, you could do scheduling in Workflow Max, but it wasn't great. And forecasting, you'd need to bring that out. Also, a lack of integrations and too much report choices. There's lots of reports, but some of them brought you with some challenges. But I'd be keen to, I'm just launching a final quiz now. I'd be keen to get your feedback on what you thought could be improved in Workflow Max. So we'll jump in there and we'll fill in the word cloud there. You've got workforce management. I'm not sure what you mean there. Is it scheduling or is it forecasting or what? What is it? Feel free to drop a note in the chat. I think we've got a response from everybody, and look, that's great. It shows that that you all know the product really well, and you've always found of things that could be improved if you wish it could be improved. But we can certainly see some trends in there: reporting, scheduling, planning, resource planning. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks for that, Andrea. Yeah, there's certainly some tools in there that would be lacking. So I'm now going to hand over to Lauren and introduce Lauren onto this call. And we're going to talk, we're not going to demonstrate Workflow Max. If you want to, sorry, Projectworks, if you want to do that, we can do that afterwards and we can do a personalized one for you. That's fine. But I thought what would be useful here is to talk with Lauren around how projects works and some of the differences between Workflow Max. And so I've got a few areas. It's a big slide of some points, but Lauren and I are going to talk through some of the differences, and we've got a couple of screenshots that we want to talk through. As I said, if you wanted to book a demonstration, we can certainly do that afterwards. If you've got questions, now's the time to either drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. So we've been looking at Projectworks for a while. Where I see some of the differences to Workflow Max are on the slide here. And I think one of the big things is it allows you to get a forward view of your revenue, your utilization, your burn, and I'll come back to that term because that was a new one for me, and your margin. So it allows you to look forward in the business as opposed to backwards. For those that are wondering what the term burn is, if you've heard of that before, that's great, but I hadn't. And so the way I think about burn, and Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, is you've set a budget and you burn through that budget as you put hours against that budget. And how in Projectworks works was that you can is it a rate card for people? So you might say to a client, great, here's my quote for, I don't know, 100 grand worth of work, and here's my rate card. And then you burn through that based on the rate card of the various people that are working on. Does that sound like burn down in the agile world? There you go. Does that sound fair, Lauren?
That's absolutely right, David. Yep, you nailed it.
Excellent. Thank you. Obviously, with software, there's so many what ifs, and you can burn through your rate at the hourly rate for yourself. You might have a custom rate, you might have a rate that's different on a Tuesdays and Fridays, or whatever, perfect, or a multi-currency rate. So you can do all those calculations, but at a high level, think about it. You set a budget, you then burn through it. One of the other differences, and we were talking about this earlier, Lauren, was around Projectworks allows you to, as the default option, you quote in dollars. So you may generate a quote, and often you may do that outside of Projectworks, and that may be a larger project. And you put in the dollars, and then you burn through the dollars. So you burn down, whereas in Workflow Max, you build up a quote. Really, you start and you put in the time and the hours, and then you build up from there. I know you can do both, Lauren, but is that sort of a fair difference between the two?
Yeah, I think you're right, David. You can do the same as you've done in Workflow Max by building up the budget if that's what works for your company. Or,
Mhm.
yeah, you can kind of go what we call from the top down. So just setting a fixed fee for a budget by budget lines for a project, and then, yeah, using that to quote out from there.
Cool. We've got a lot of other things on the slide, and I think everybody can read off them. One of the ones that I quite like is the multi-currency. That can be really useful, and also this ability, which often is driven from multi-currency or firm relationships. In Workflow Max, you have to have one Workflow Max and one Zero, and talk between the two, which meant it a pain if you were working across multiple companies. I believe in Projectworks you can have one Projectworks and multiple zeros. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. So if you have some different offices in different locations, you can set them up as separate organizations in Projectworks, and then they can connect to separate Zero instances. So it's quite,
Perfect.
yeah, much simpler.
Perfect. So you can have one project works, all your resources, but they could be working for different subsidiary companies and jumping into different things.
Exactly.
One of the other ones that we see a little bit is when you invoice, you've got a bit more flexibility on how you invoice. So you can invoice dollars or time and material on the same invoice, which is a nice unique, and I know architects like that quite a lot. Um, and one of the ones that I thought was interesting was around leave. So just talk to me, Lauren. Projectworks has got some quite neat scheduling capability, hasn't it?
Yeah, yep. So we have some resourcing, a resource. You can add people to projects and resource them onto that project. But we also have leave as a module in Projectworks, so people can go ahead and add their leave in Projectworks. That automatically goes into resourcing and also the timesheet. And if you are using Zero, that can also be pushed to Zero as well.
So that's probably the reason why I've got a lot on my plate this week, because I took last week off on holiday skiing, and so all the work that I was supposed to do obviously lands into this week. But at least it gives the visibility to other team members, so they can see that actually that person's probably going to have some quite high utilization during that period of time because they've got their leave there, or they can have a hard conversation on, do you really want to take leave, or do we really want you to take leave at that time in this project? So there's some quite neat features in that space. So there's a few questions coming through. Does Projectworks connect to 12D Synergy?
I would say, yeah. Do you want to go ahead,
Yep.
David? Do you want me to take it?
Yeah, no, you can take it. I know 12D Synergy.
We don't
Um,
integrate with 12D Synergy, but can you just jog my memory? Is that the document management system?
yeah, it's a document
Yeah.
management system. Yep, correct.
Yeah. So we
Um,
wouldn't integrate with it, but what you can do in Projectworks is if that's where all of your documents are being held, you can just keep the URL link in a custom field on your projects in Projectworks. So it's quite easy to access that way.
I think one of the things, and look, I suspect we're going to get lots of. Does it integrate with this? Does it integrate with my Nespresso coffee machine? Does it do this? Does it do that? And that's where this Zapier make and Power Automate the tools, and it's more of a modern approach on how it's architected. Is that yes, Projectworks integrates into Zapier and Make, and from there, you can go elsewhere, probably not to your Nespresso coffee machine, but if 12D Synergy is also integrated into Zapier, then you can make those links without having to rely on the vendors on either side actually making the integration themselves. Yes, you've got to pay for that middle layer, but often that's a quicker way to get some efficiencies around integrations there. So some quite neat stuff there. I'm going to move on. What other questions have we got here? Does it integrate to any other payroll systems?
No.
So no, so it just integrates into Xero, but you can export out that time records just like you do in Workflow Max and then import it into various other pay modules from there. So you've certainly got that ability to do across with Projectworks. Okay, I'm just going to bring up this next slide because we've got a couple of screenshots of the tool. As I said, if you want a demonstration, we can do through. But this is the revenue forecasting by project screen. So I might get you to talk to this one if that's okay, Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely. So on this screenshot, we can see here we're in the project of services engagement. And this revenue forecast screen within that project is showing the amount that you're intending to invoice for each month, broken down by budget line. So in this example for March, I can see capability assessment, that budget line. I'm intending to invoice 3,850. You can raise an invoice directly from this screen. There's other screens where you can raise and indicate your revenue forecast, so it's raised for the whole company. And what I really like about this screen, now it's really hard to see here, but in that little green area, there's a worked and resourced. So you can actually see the worth of what's been worked in timesheets for each month. And you can also see any future resourcing that you've given to people for this project. So you can always kind of check back for your revenue forecasts and see how it's tracking against what the actuals and also what you've projected into the future into resourcing.
Oh, perfect. Should move to the next screen, which is so this is the burn screen as we've put it. It gives you a visual view of the burn. So what's happening? What's this yellow line here? What's happening here, Lauren?
Yeah, so that yellow line is today. So this is a
Right.
live view. And that red line is the total budget for the project. So in this case, it's 170,000. And you see a dark gray line kind of creeping up from the bottom left hand of the graph.
Oh, this one, sorry.
Yeah, that one. Yep. So
Yep.
that's showing you the actuals, what the worth of what's been worked in timesheets up until
Mm-hmm.
today. And then that next dotted gray line that you had highlighted, David, that is the
This one.
worth of what's been resourced. Exactly. Yeah. So that's looking into the future. So I think David was spot on when he said that Projectworks, we do look at the actuals, we look at the past, but we also are really good at, we're very forward facing and looking into how our project is going. Are we going to go over budget? And there's a lot of different reports and different ways that we can see that. Now, in this graph, what we would not want to see is that dotted gray line kind of going over that dark red line. Yeah, that would be bad. That's showing you that you've resourced people, and if they do the work that they've been resourced, you're going to go over budget. So you might have to
Oh,
rework a few things
I
there.
think that project's looking okay, I think,
It
at the
is.
moment for the
Yeah.
thing, which is good. We had a question from Ian. How do you manage user settings one-on-one like Workflow Max, or can you create user groups and manage group settings? So I think that's a good question. As you get more people, you want to manage them, and they may be people in similar roles. Can you manage them as a group together rather than coming in and managing John, Mary, and Steve individually? And I presume that's user access and rates and other things like that.
That's right. Yeah, we have a pretty robust permission level. So everyone is grouped into a permission level, and then there are very flexible access settings for that you can set.
But you can manage them as a group of people, so you can put
Yes,
all your senior engineers into one group, and that's the permissions they get and the rates that they work. And if a junior engineer steps up to a senior engineer, I presume you can move them into the next group. Perfect.
absolutely. Yep.
Thank you for that. Hopefully that covers that question there, Ian. Okay, last screenshot in here is around resource scheduling. Now, I think this is interesting. Would you, if you're, say, reliant on a building consent, you can probably forecast when your revenue is going to come, because you know that once you get building consent, you start doing stuff. But would you resource schedule then or after? When would you use resource scheduling? Because we know that this was, I think it was one of the top requested features that we saw earlier in the poll. So let's dig into when and how you would use it.
Yeah, typically people would resource a project. So a lot of times once it's been confirmed, you have that resource consent, you're able to go ahead and resource people onto that. So in this report here, we can see the green showing people have been resourced a perfect amount for their availability. So let's say they're working 40 hours a week, so they're good to go. Now the yellow is showing that they have availability. So they do need resourcing. They need some work to be put onto some projects. And then the red is showing that they actually have been over-resourced by that amount. So over-resourced by 15 hours, by 10 hours, as
So,
David is
so
highlighting
looking
there.
at that, if I was on leave for a week, what would it show? If I put my leave in, where would it show in here?
So it would typically show, it would be a gray
Right.
box, and it might show a
Yep.
little plain. Yeah.
Okay, so it's visible that you can't. So
Yeah.
obviously you'd see possibly red after leave and before leave, but
Yeah.
preferably not, because you're resourcing around that. And what about? I know it's a little bit hard to see, but what about the chart up in here? What's that showing?
Yeah, so that red line is showing the billable target for your organization, so for all your staff. So what you really
Great.
want to see is that dark green line, which is the billable hours, meet
Hmm.
that red line for the billable target. Then
Okay,
you're
perfect.
in a good place.
That's the picture we had earlier with the 12 people and what your target was, and when people were available and not available. So you can bring that up and actually see that in a visual, both backwards and forwards, I'm imagining.
Exactly. Yep,
Perfect.
that blue is
Excellent.
showing the timesheets of what's been done.
Perfect. So what I feel about scheduling is it's awesome. It's great. It gives you the information. It's really is what you need from that forward-looking point of view. But there is some responsibility and time to, you're going to need to come in and actually do some work to get the scheduling out of it. But the beauty I think I see here within Projectworks is it all sits within the same system. So instead of looking in different areas to get that resource, the picture is all there in one place. But yeah, what are your thoughts? What do your customers see that they enjoy about the resource scheduling area?
Yeah, they find this to really save themselves in a lot of ways. They really like this view. There's a few other views, but this is a really good view to kind of give them a big picture, high level, 10,000-foot view of what's going on in their organization. Do they need to find more work, or do they have too much work?
So I know this is a popular area in the quiz that we did earlier. Are there any other questions? Just drop one in the chat if you've got around resource scheduling and what you can do, or does this give you, or just give us a thumbs up if that gives you a really good feel at a high level of what's achievable. Obviously, I think up here, Lauren, you can come in and you can filter that and look at resources based on which type of people or which type of department that might allow you to forecast when you need to hire certain different types of people, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Yep. You can choose to see what's only relevant to you. If you're managing a team or just a few projects, you're able to narrow it down there.
Cool. Perfect. Okay. So when will Workflow Max be sold? I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that question there, Ian. I think if it's when will Workflow Max be discontinued, it's June next year. So June 24th, I think, is the date. Much to the annoyance of our Australian friends. From there. Projectworks, yeah, been around for 10 years. Came out of a firm called Provoke, who are a large Microsoft vendor in Wellington and in Seattle. And so it was an internal tool, and it's been launched commercially around from 2019. There's a really good podcast that I had to listen to with Matthew, who's the founder and one of the areas around the journey that they've been on so far. So I encourage you to have a listen to that. I can send you the link if you like. Gives you a good background on the company and the story. So how do I decide what I want to do next? Where do I go from here? So I think one of the important thing is there's no identical replacement. The new Mini is very different. The old Mini, and we've actually got one of the new Minis now, is very different to the new Mini. Okay. I'll catch your questions just once we get through these slides, and we'll do this in the general Q&A if that's okay, Ian. The things to think about when you to decide is what's your current usage. So what are the processes you go through? How do you invoice? What are the volume of jobs? Do you do lots of jobs or lots of really big jobs or lots of small jobs? And how do you report? And then also think about what you do outside of Workflow Max. So we know that resourcing, forecasting, scheduling, those type of things. What do you do outside of Workflow Max and how does that work? Because there'll be some efficiencies there. I think this third one's important also is the change. How is your market changing? So are you invoicing more on milestones or contracts or time and materials? What's changing in your market? Are you moving to the golden utopia in professional services of value added value based pricing as opposed to hourly based pricing? So what's happening in your market as you start to sell your IP? One of the important things is let your current usage guide your requirements, but your requirements may have changed. That Mini may have been okay, but your requirements may have changed over time, and the Mini possibly could have been replaced with a station wagon at some stage. So let those usage drive from that space. What can you do now? So you've still got plenty of time, but document your processes and flow. That allows you to decide what you want, identify any efficiencies that you could gain, and that becomes your requirements. And then identify areas that you can't do now, but you'd like to do potentially. That becomes your nice to have. And that's where the value comes or the return on investment in that space. And just a little plug for Ripped Orange. So we can help you through this. Feel free to read our blogs, join our user group on our website. We can arrange a demonstration of alternatives, including Projectworks, and we can review or document your current usage. So we can work you through that, and we can help implement some of these tools as well, including Projectworks. But I'm going to pause now and just come up for questions. So there's a few questions there. I think Ian was asking. The question there was, is there a long-term development plan? And I think that's really important. We've been using Workflow Max for 10 years, and whatever choice that we make, we'd like that tool to be around for a long period of time and also evolve. And that was probably the disappointment with Workflow Max over the past 5 years or 4 years is not a lot of continuous investment. But I certainly see, you want a tool to be around for a period of time. So you don't want to have to go through the hassle and change of moving once and then moving off from that space. We've done some due diligence across some of these tools, but I might just get Lauren to talk to that around your sort of your long-term development plan.
Yeah, we absolutely have one. And I can assure you that we'll definitely be around for more than a couple of years. We're certainly still in our growth stage, and we've been increasing our customers quite rapidly the past few years. So I would assure you to not worry about that. Now, we certainly do have a roadmap, but I don't believe it's published on our website. I could probably follow up about that and see if there's any kind of general things that we can share, and then I can pass that on to David, and maybe he can
But
pass that on to you if that would work.
I think one of the things that's important when you're looking at, especially SaaS services where you're paying per month, is what are the releases? What are the new updates? And normally they'll have a knowledge site, and you should be able to come in there and see, okay, this is what we did last week, last month, etc. And yes, some of it might be we fixed this bug and we did this and that, but it allows you to see, and that gives you an idea. And it's the same across iPhone apps or anything like that. It gives you a feel for how fresh and how much work there is in development. If there hasn't been any update in development since 3 years ago, then perhaps the product's not getting the love or attention that it should do.
Yeah, and
Monthly
I'll just
fees, I
add,
can.
oh, sorry,
Yep,
can I just
you
add,
go.
David? I would encourage you to, have a look at our release list, because that you'll see that we do either weekly or bi-weekly releases. So we do release product very frequently.
Monthly fees, so I can answer that. Projectworks is $40 per user per month, starting at 10 users. I can see another couple of questions here that came in the Q&A, so I'm just going to look at that. Sorry, I missed those earlier, Claire. So can scheduling be done by different offices or only in total for the organisation? So, sorry, I'll read that again, Lauren. So
Yep.
can scheduling be done by different offices or only in total for the organisation? So I imagine that's scheduling by office, not by skill set.
Yep, it could be done both ways. So you could schedule, if you only wanted to schedule those in your office or your organization, you'd be able to do that. But if you did want to have a look across all of them, that's an option too.
Yep.
And of course, you'd have to have the permission levels to see everyone and all of their scheduling. But yeah.
Sure. And Claire had another good question. Can you create a quote first through Projectworks for sending to a client, and then once accepted, the job automatically set up? Job setup is then done at the beginning. So I might answer this. In Workflow Max, you could create a quote and then a job, but you couldn't. So you could create a job without a quote, or you could create a quote, then that would work through an estimate from there. In Projectworks, you create the job first, but you can create a quote from that. So it's the other way. It's the other way around. But you can copy a job as a job template, and that allows you to start on a quote. But I might get you to talk to that. I notice I've asked this question of the projects team a lot, and a lot of clients, they're doing a large project, and we see this as well. They may actually quote that outside of Workflow Max, but there's a lot of work involved to get the detail, and then they bring that through. But Lauren, any comments on that?
Yeah, typically the way, as David said, the way it would work is that you'd kind of build up that budget initially in Projectworks, and then you would create your quote from that. So there wouldn't need to be kind of creating your quote and then having to go back and kind of creating the project, because that would already be created in order to create the quote, if that makes sense.
Perfect. And we can drill into those in a demonstration. Kathy had a good question. Didn't I hear that there is a transfer over free offer and reduced fees for? No, you didn't hear that at all, Kathy. No such thing. Yes, there is. So and this is, how you're doing your due diligence on tools. Projectworks offers a free, and I don't know if there's time related to this offer, import in of data. So you can call that transfer over. So that's the technical side of it. You are going to need some assistance, professional services assistance, to configure it the way you want. And yes, there is a cost involved in doing that, and you can go through a partner like ourselves to help you with that. And yes, there is a discount. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. For the first, I think it is the first couple of months.
I think it's
What is
3
that?
months. Yeah, the first 3
3 months.
months.
Yep. Yep. From there. So yes, there's some time, there's a discount there that's available for you off your license fees when you first start. Ian, good question. Can you design, issue, process signing of contract documents? So is that, we've worked with one, and I can't remember the name of the tool, but it wasn't DocuSign, but the equivalent, where you put the document up in there, and then it does something next through I think it was Make or Zapier in Projectworks. But I think your question there, Ian, may be, okay, we've got a job underway, and I want to get somebody to sign off on a variation or sign off on something. Lauren, any options in there apart from, presume you would look at the integrations, wouldn't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So yes, there's some options in there. Actually, there's a couple that I can think of that we could jump into that at this stage. But you look into the other tools that you partner with. Just check the Q&A. Some good questions there. Perfect. Yep. Thanks, Claire, for your comments there. So if we've got any other questions, otherwise I think we are just on time now anyway.
I think there's a few in the chat, David.
A few ones popped up in the chat. Let's have a look. It is probably a good choice for a company with a high number of small jobs. Look, that's an interesting one. You'd have to dig through them through that. The key thing there is templating the setup, and it depends on whether the job is a fixed price or just a time and material. So it's all around how quickly you can create a job. But I would think, outside of just Projectworks here, because you may go, great, we've got a very quick job. I want to be able to send a proposal to a client, and when they press go, it actually creates the job in Projectworks, and I start recording my time there. Time recording is the same, but what you want to do is, if you've got a job, we had a client that that does small web changes, so the jobs are only 2 or 3 hours. You want to make that whole end to end from acceptance to completion as quick as possible. And yes, the time tracking portion is important on that, but so is the client's approval, the client's payment. Do you put in a thing at the front that they approve and pay at the same time? You want to get the whole life cycle of the job as quick as possible. I think that was a really good question. I think that Joe, and it's something that we've been certainly looking at ourselves. Excellent. So if that's all, thank you again for your time. Feel free to reach out to us on our website if you want to book a demonstration or a Q&A session. They're free, and we can delve into this in any further way. We'll send out the recording afterwards, but otherwise, thank you for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I see Kathy's typing. We'll see what Kathy's got to say. Isn't that always annoying? Thank you both. Thanks, Kathy. Kia ora.
Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, David.